Hey everyone, so we are back for another episode. I'm joined again by Aoife, that Irish dietitian, and we have got a really interesting conversation coming up for you. We are going to talk about a drug that you might have seen a lot in the headlines, Ozempic. Aoife needs no introduction, but if you haven't listened to an earlier podcast, she is a dietitian who works with intuitive eating, weight inclusive approach, and who works with anyone who struggles with eating disorders, disordered eating. Fair to say, Aoife?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Melanie.
I suppose I'm going to frame this with sometimes when we hear of a study or when we hear of something released in the media, it really gets hyped up. And I know that's a
Mhm.
conversation for another day. We might talk about that sometime, not to read everything you see in the headlines because it's not always true to the study, as you did talk through in the last episode that we had together. But I want to ask you about, I suppose, framing the context for people listening to this. We're talking about Ozempic, and I want to ask you about your lived experience as a dietitian working in a clinic where you were supporting people with weight loss and using other weight loss drugs.
Yeah, perfect. So, yeah, as you say, when I initially, I know this is tracking back a little bit, but when I initially went into dietetics, it was because anything that I don't understand just really gets me curious and really gets me going. And one of the things that I was surrounded by growing up was this constant talk about weight loss, but there didn't really seem to be
Mm.
an answer. So that was quite a large reason why I did go on to study dietetics, and it was to try to find that answer. And then went on following dietetics, going into the weight loss arena and practicing that area because it was something that I was very, very passionate about. And when I was working
Mm.
in weight loss, I was working in, as you say, weight loss clinics. I was in a unique position where I was prescribing weight loss drugs. That's not something that is very common in dietetics, and you have to go through quite stringent processes in order to be able to do that. And it's a very supportive program in order to be able to prescribe drugs like that. And I also worked with weight loss surgery as well. When I was working in that area, I wasn't quite getting the results I was expecting. And the results and
Mm.
how people were presenting and the journey that they went through and the outcomes that they were also expecting it to achieve, it wasn't always getting achieved. And a lot of people were leaving deflated. And it wasn't, very quickly I decided to look into the research as a whole and see, right, is this something that's actually working? Long story short, we decided to switch into a focus or an area of work where weight loss isn't the focus anymore. And as I've spoken to
Yeah.
Denise, that whole story is probably another episode. But the background in having prescribed those weight loss medications, not the same as the
Mm.
ones we're going to talk about today, but it has given me a background in the understanding of
Mhm.
the prescription of these kinds of drugs can look like for people on a day-to-day basis as well. And it is also one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I'm so passionate about the misinformation around weight loss drugs and also trying to get to the truth and spread that knowledge.
Mm. Two areas that you've mentioned there that piqued my interest, Aoife. And the first one is, did you get the answers in your studies in dietetics about weight loss? And I shared that coming from my own realization after studying nutritional therapy, which was geared as well towards weight loss. But sitting in a conference and hearing many people talking about what we understand about weight gain and body sizes, but not having answers. And I
Mhm.
suppose probably where I ended up was the biggest discussion that I had heard that struck my heart was it is a social issue because there is a big divide with who has got access to food and who's got access to healthcare and all of that. So
Mhm.
did you find the answers?
Big question. I feel like I got a lot of understanding, about the science and how food is metabolized, and it's really focused on the food and the process the food goes through
Mm.
when it's going through your body and how that all gets digested and broken down. And also
Mhm.
understandings, as you say, some level of understanding around the social and genetics aspect, which is quite a significant
Mm.
aspect as well. What is, I suppose, one of the big things that when it comes to food, when we when we place all of our efforts on solely focusing on the food itself and the journey the food itself goes through, we're removing the sum of our parts. Food isn't just macronutrients. Our relationship with food isn't just how it gets metabolized. And so we're never going to be able to interact with food based on, this meal has X macronutrients, X vitamins, X minerals. We, as humans, we don't function like that. So that didn't seem to be able to sit into that answer in terms of speaking with people about weight loss as well.
Then going back to the results.
People were coming in clinics, and this was in the weight loss clinic using conventional methods and dietary advice. And this isn't specific to, my particular workplace. This is an experience that is shared across different clinics, is that people will come in and the weight on the scales dictates how that person leaves that appointment. They're either incredibly elevated because the weight has perhaps gone down, whether the weight maintains or whether it increases will dictate how they feel for that session and how they feel for that day. And that was a big thing. That was something where, focusing in on that scales had a serious impact on the patients that were coming in. As well as that, it's the people who were trying the most. It wasn't, results weren't dictated by who was putting the most effort in, because no matter how much effort people were putting in, it didn't really equate to what kind of results they were getting. And the people who were trying the hardest weren't getting these weight loss results that are kind of promised and touted everywhere, that everyone can lose weight. So that's when I went to the research and looking at the research, started finding that I found similar to in my clinics, which is that some people can lose weight short term. Some people can, but the majority of people regain that weight. And then up to a third of people will regain more weight than what they lost in the first place. And that was something I saw reflected in these clinics. And then the weight of blame, or not even blame, but if there's that expectation that you're going to go to this place, you're going to get support and you're going to lose weight, or you're going to take this medication, the level of expectation is even higher. And then to come out the other side and not get those outcomes that you expected, that can come with a lot of shame as well.
Yeah, a lot of feelings of failure. And I just actually had some client this year, and it's like, I just done with trying so hard and ending up where I've gained more. And I suppose we are both so grateful that we know there are other options. Okay, thank you so much for that. The drug, Ozempic, it has hit the headlines. I've asked you to talk about this because I have not done as much reading and research around it. So could you share with everyone listening, who is Ozempic for?
So in terms of Ozempic, contrary to popular belief, Ozempic is actually a drug which is licensed for diabetes. It's not licensed primarily for weight loss. And the reason that a lot of people do believe that it is licensed for weight loss is because when it's spoken about in the media, there's a lot of media attention, and it is always the brand name Ozempic, which is being linked with this weight loss. So at the moment, what we have is a lot of people who believe that it's the Ozempic brand name, which is licensed for weight loss. What the company who's produced Ozempic have done is they have produced a sister drug, which is called Wegovy. And Wegovy has the exact same active ingredient inside of it, semaglutide or semaglutide. And Wegovy is what's licensed for weight loss at the moment.
So we've got a clear distinction. There's Ozempic and there's Wegovy. One is licensed for diabetes and one is licensed for weight loss. So tell us a little bit more about how those are used.
When it comes to Ozempic, so both of them are a once weekly injectable. And the first one, as we mentioned, that was produced was Ozempic, and that was used for diabetes. And the active ingredient, as I mentioned, semaglutide, helps to produce insulin. So it helps with that blood sugar control. That's why it can be really useful for people with type 2 diabetes. What Novo Nordisk, so that's the company who produces Ozempic, what they noticed when they saw this, or in clinical trials, when people were using Ozempic, was that there was some levels of weight loss. So they decided to investigate that further. And that's when they did a clinical trial on that same active ingredient, but they increased the dose. And that's important as well. So it's the same active ingredient, they increased the dose, and they completed a clinical trial. And that is now what's being sold for weight loss under the brand name Wegovy.
Let's come back to weight loss. How effective is the drug then for weight loss?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question as well. And I think it'll tie into some of the things that we spoke about in terms of when we're looking at weight loss and when I've worked with weight loss medications before. So what Novo Nordisk have done is they've released research into this drug and whether it does produce weight loss effect. In this research study, what they showed was that there was an average of 15 kilograms weight loss. Some people lost more, some people lost less. So this is a really big selling point that was hammered home by this drug company, Novo Nordisk, because it's a significantly more weight loss than is seen by previous drugs that they have produced. It's something that needs to be taken once a week as opposed to something that's taken daily. So there was a couple of selling points that have come out of this research paper. And again, research paper is something that I have a passion for and I've looked into. And so there are a couple of things when you're looking at research paper, because these are compelling, and especially because we have such desires for weight loss that the minute we see that weight loss figure, that potential transformation, we're hooked. What is interesting to do is to take it back a little minute and look at what is a good standard for weight loss research and how that compares to it.
Okay.
When we're looking at weight loss research, we quite consistently see in conventional methods such as simple dietary advice or plans, as well as in medications, that there can be weight loss. However, as I mentioned earlier, most of the people will regain that weight, and some people regain more weight than what they lost in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And that's what is known as the Nike tick of weight loss research. So if you can picture a Nike tick, some people can lose weight, but it can come back on again. When we look at what time period is the risk for weight regain, it's the 2 to 5 year mark. So by 2 to 5 years, most people regain weight following a weight loss intervention. So that's the risk period. When we're looking at the research, the research paper that's behind this drug, Wegovy, which is essentially Ozempic, but at a higher dose and released for weight loss or licensed for weight loss, it shows this weight loss trend up until 68 weeks. So just over a year is when they stopped that research trial. It stops short of that 2 to 5 year mark. And when we look at the curve that's present in that research paper, the weight is coming down, but it's actually has already leveled out and is starting to ever so slightly come back up when that clinical research paper was abruptly stopped.
And maybe you're going to correct some of what I say in this so that I get the understanding right. But what I hear is that this has potential benefit, but the research is not fully there yet. What I'm hearing is that we need to do longer research to see if this is effective for those claims that are put out there. I didn't look at the sample, but maybe does the sample of the population need to be looked at, because have they taken into account all of the people with all of the individual circumstances? So I suppose that comes back to our thoughts earlier about media headlines and marketing and selling. You know, that piece that you just said is so interesting. Is there that 2 to 5 year effectiveness guaranteed?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Is it guaranteed? And it's not as simple as, someone tries to lose weight. This may or may not work. It's worth a try. Might as well do it because it's showing some results in 68 weeks. There's a temptation to maybe think on that kind of side. What is happening here is this weight loss drug is actually inducing, it is forcing you to weight cycle. So it is bringing your weight down significantly. And the drug companies, it is nice to assume that it is from a nice place or from a supportive place that will support our health. But the drug companies do have the research. So they've released a follow-up paper which shows what happens. They don't have the long-term research on the drug, but they've shown a research paper of what happens when people do stop taking the drug. And what is seen is, people immediately start to regain the weight once they stop taking the drug. So there is a high risk of weight cycling and significant weight fluctuations here. And people who lose more weight experience more severe weight fluctuations. And weight fluctuations and cycling isn't a risk-free health behavior or outcome from this, because weight cycling in of itself is associated with poor cardiometabolic or heart outcomes and other health parameters as well. So that's one aspect.
And I think maybe for this episode, we just even give that piece, that what the drug is doing is mirroring what we know about in this yo-yo dieting effect. And what we both here in clinic is, I've lost the weight in 6 weeks, but I've regained the weight and more. And the mental impact on that is massive, but the physiological, the body impact, as you've just said, is their cardiometabolic fitness has disimproved. Would that, am I saying, or maybe just it hasn't improved?
No, you're right. You were right in saying that it specifically has a negative impact on cardiometabolic outcomes. And I'm glad you also kind of mentioned the psychological impacts of that, with the high expectations and not meeting that, and feeling like there's, we spoke to this before, but feeling like there's something wrong with you, that you did something wrong, that you failed. But again, if this is not sound research, they have not looked at this research long term. It is not just me saying this. There are many experts in weight loss research, and that 2 to 5 year mark is a standard. That is the risk period. That is the period that needs to be looked at to show that something has long-term effects. And unless we have results within that 2 to 5 year period, we essentially don't really have any proof that this is sustainable, that this has sustainable weight loss results.
So, Aoife, just for somebody listening, because I know sometimes this kind of information can be a lot to take in. Both you and I are always about just making somebody, when we're taking in new information. I remember when I got health information, I just felt overwhelmed. So if we can just do a quick little summary again for everyone, just on what this piece means.
As it stands, the research behind Wegovy isn't sufficient to say that it produces long-term weight loss results. What experts in the field say is that we need results 2 to 5 years down the line in order to prove that something is a sustainable weight loss method. When it comes to the research behind Wegovy or Ozempic, the Wegovy trial ended at 68 weeks, just when we started to see that tail end was starting to increase, and then they stopped it, and they stopped it before that 2 year mark. So we actually don't know. And as I mentioned earlier, this is essentially inducing weight cycling. So it's not harm-free. And that weight cycling piece, it's linked to your cardiometabolic health and your overall health as well.
Yeah. So I suppose that's just really useful for people to know that in the headlines, you won't always hear the potential downside or potential risks. So it's just that reminder that, here's what the sensations are saying, but here's what people with the experience also saying. And what I would feel is that this is not for anyone to make the choice and say that one side is right or wrong. I always tend to try and go towards neutral. I think when you have more information like this, you will know in your body where you want to go. Because if what you've heard just said now feels right in your body, then it's not bad information. And sometimes I think when we feel pushed on, when there's two such conflicting pieces of guidance out there, we can feel very confused in ourselves as to where do we follow. And that's why I'm saying there's no right or wrong. Everyone listening will make the best choice for them. But I suppose, maybe ask Aoife, do you feel the same? If you listen into yourself, if it feels that this information is good in your body and it's not a bad piece of information, and if you want more support,
Mhm.
please do reach out to Aoife to give you more scientific side on it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, as you say, Denise, the overwhelming messaging that we're getting at the moment, it's really similar to, previous overwhelming messaging from like Weight Watchers, where they have the before and after pictures plastered absolutely everywhere. It's
Mm.
really overwhelming. And the thing about this is we're also getting the messaging from healthcare, and healthcare, um, that area is seen as some place that we can trust. And again, as you say, it's not always from a place of intentional harm or anything like that. Not a lot of people have the time or are in this area where they do look critically at the weight loss research. And this is an area that is growing and growing and growing, thankfully, at the moment, but not everyone has the access to it. But this is why it is really useful. And as you say, Denise, there is conflict in the pieces of information, and it can be really difficult to decide what might be best for you. But I do think, as you say, listening to your gut, listening to what sits right with your known truths, and whether this is something that does speak to you, and it can be useful to reflect on it, reach out, DM me. There's more resources on this kind of information to hand as well, which can be useful to sit with too.
Mm. Oh, Aoife, I've got goosebumps listening to all of this, and I think everyone listening will too. So, Aoife, I know you've been doing a lot of talking today, but I have one final piece that I would really love to talk to you about. And I suppose it's the question, we've both mentioned psychological, emotional impacts of having a struggle with your relationship with food, and maybe why people will go and ask for this weight loss drug. Does Ozempic or Wegovy help people with the binge eating side of things, with maybe disordered eating behaviors where it's overly restrictive, or where people are over exercising, under eating? And I'm not talking about an eating disorder. I'm talking about that disordered pattern of behavior where we're actually not able to be free and enjoy food. Do the drugs help for those things?
I think, yeah, the messaging that's out there at the moment, and when I was reading, comments of people experiencing or expressing their experience with Ozempic or Wegovy, there's this kind of line that because Wegovy impacts your appetite, a lot of people report feeling like, their brain is silenced, or it's calm, it's peaceful. They don't have that drive to eat anymore, and food is no longer overwhelming, and they don't feel that impulsion and out of control feeling around food. So it's less so, the messaging is less so around people who originally have restrictive type eating disorders, or disordered eating patterns. Even though we do, as you know, in people who feel out of control around food, or maybe feel that they eat more than they'd like to, sometimes there can be elements of restriction there, but it's more so in that realm that we see the messaging. So when it comes to Wegovy, first of all, it can be helpful to think about, and whenever we're looking at weight loss, there actually is a higher rate of people who seek weight loss and seek weight loss interventions. There's higher rates of people who may binge or may feel out of control around food in the first place. So there's higher instances of disordered eating and eating disorders in that group of people in the first place.
Okay.
Also, what happens is whenever there's a weight loss intervention, whether it's conventional advice, whether it's a slimming group, or whether it's a medication, there is an increased risk of eating disorders. We see it in the research, but we also see it from clinical experience as well, that these things can have very real impacts to your relationship with food. Wegovy, as I mentioned earlier, it has an impact to your insulin and your blood sugars from a diabetes perspective. How it works from a weight loss perspective is it suppresses appetite. And when we hear appetite suppressant, we think, amazing weight loss, because weight loss is seen as this good thing, no matter the cost, no matter what's lost along the way, no matter the impact. Once
Mhm.
we as a society hear weight loss, everything else kind of falls by the wayside.
Mm.
But what's really important to take seriously is that we don't know the extent to the impact on appetite with this drug. That's not
Okay.
been measured. It's not been measured at this dose. And there have been not studies, but people talking about their appetite being so impacted that they just can't eat enough during the day at all. And so there's a risk there. That's a serious risk in of itself. That's induced malnutrition. That's malnutrition going on
Mm.
there, and that has serious consequences in of itself. But because we
Mm.
have a society who is so, weight loss, again, is seen as this thing that we should all strive for, no matter the cost. We've seen in other interventions that people will push through really significant side effects to get to that end goal of weight loss. So my concern, and I am really concerned as someone who deals specifically with eating disorders, but also as someone who deals with people who just know that their relationship with food is not right. I am concerned of the impact that this drug is going to have on people and their relationship with food as well.
Wow, I can really hear that concern in you.
Mm.
And I know by the amount of research reading that you do and how take apart papers that it's not just from, it's a deep concern that you have because you've looked at the information, you've looked at the science. You started out with saying how curious you are. When you didn't get answers, you go and find answers. And I think what you've just said there is that intention, the intention behind the action or the choice of the action is weight loss. And what if that weight creeps back up in that 2 to 5 years? How has the person learned or supported themselves to be with their body and to mind their body and to include all the things you mentioned about health promoting behaviors? And are they learning unhelpful behaviors as they go too?
And yeah, there's kind of two outcomes. You kind of mentioned one. So you've got someone who goes on this drug, gets to a certain weight, and then they continue to take this drug and the weight comes back on. And there's all of the praise as the weight's going down, and then silence or comments or whatever it is. All of this happens as the weight comes back on, as well as the physiological, the physical impact.
Mm-hmm.
You've also got the other option, which is someone takes this drug, it has a significant impact to their appetite, they're not eating enough, and the weight goes down and the weight stays down. But because they've achieved that weight, or that's seen as an achievement, that they will persist with that drug despite all of the other impacts. And, malnutrition, it has an impact to every single system in your body. It impacts your well-being. People are more likely to be depressed. There is a note on this drug that there is a risk of increased suicidal thoughts. So this is a known thing. This isn't just, again, it isn't just me saying it. It isn't just the experts in this field saying it. The drug companies know this and they're putting this on. They do have it on their websites as well. So it's really serious.
Just picking up on that piece you said about the malnutrition. And when you think about the movement of preventative healthcare and supporting yourselves, it's all about getting in your macros and your micros. And, we see the rise of the superfoods. But as you've just said, the weight loss is the focus. Is the body being built to be strong enough to have an effective immune system, to have a good functioning hormonal system, to have an energy system that's giving you the energy to do the things? Will you be able to do your workouts to build your muscles so that you're going to support your body and protect against osteoporosis? So it's like, this is a massive one. Oh my God, I've got it in my gut right now. It's like, wow.
Yes. And that's why when we come back to the fact that the research paper that all of the Ozempic and Wegovy messaging is built on is is based on a 68-week trial, which was run by the drug company themselves, which does lack certain information and stops specifically when there's a little bit of a hint of weight gain. There's questions there. That raises a lot of questions as well.
I want to share with everyone listening to this podcast that jumping on and speaking about something like this does not mean 5 minutes before. I know a lot of work and a lot of time will have gone into preparing, bringing you, because I am confident that Aoife or I are not part of the cohort of people in our industry that make millions. So this work goes in our own spare time, our own doing is because we want to bring the best information to everyone. So I really want to thank you for your time, Aoife, and for everything that you have shared with my community. And I'm bursting with excitement to share with everyone that you're going to be a feature in all of my podcasts to come to date, that you're going to be regular, and we are going to have some really, really interesting conversations. Please like, share, and just give this podcast a press of your vote that we're amazing, so that we know. Also, go check Aoife out on That Irish Dietitian and share this stuff with your friends, with your family, with your communities, with your tribe, so that more people can get access to this information, so that we can share what we're curious about, and always from a different lens.